Good afternoon. The March 1st, 2011 meeting, the Oklahoma City Water Utility Trust be in order. First matter on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the February 15th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the minutes. Are there comments or questions? Hearing none, voting please. Now vote. Whoop. There we go. The next item is the consent docket.
Move approval subject to individual consideration.
Motion and a second to approve the consent docket. Are there matters to be considered individually? Hearing none, voting please. Consent docket's approved. Next item is the concurrence docket.
Move the concurrence docket, subject to individual consideration.
Second.
Motion is second to approve the concurrence docket. Are there matters to be discussed individually? Hearing none, voting please. Concurrence docket's approved. Item 5 are the acceptance of easements. The first easement is a permanent easement along North Hefner Road between Portland and Western.
Second.
Motion is second to accept the easement. Voting. Easement's accepted. The next item is on Southeast 66th Street between South I-35 and Crossroads Boulevard.
Move approval.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve easement on 5B. Are there comments? Voting, please. That easement's accepted. Next item is easement for a sanitary relief line, Northwestern Avenue and 174th.
Move approval.
Motion and a second to approve the item 5C. Are there comments on this item? Voting, please. The easement is accepted. Next item is a series of reports, 3 in fact.
Move item A with a question.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the reports. Are there comments?
Marcia, on the water levels reports, you used to say in the reports whether it was January 1st or January 31st. Is it the first for the, they used to say?
It's the close of the previous month. So
31st?
Yes.
Okay.
Again, we're down about 7% in total meter sales. Wastewater is normal to good. Water use is up a little bit. I draw your attention to report B, which lets you know that we had to estimate water use during the heavy snow that we had earlier this month. There's a process in place for calculating a bill. Customers, of course, will contact us if they feel the bill was inaccurate. All will be resolved with the next meter read, some of which is already underway.
Are you concerned at all about the lake levels being down below what they've been the last couple of years?
No, sir, but citizens are, and we're paying close attention. We got a little bit of water yield in the rainfall over the last week, and have added a little bit of water into Lake Hefner. Generally, this is kind of a normal dry winter. Typically we grow concerned if by around the end of April we haven't seen a measurable change in lake levels. Customers have started contacting us about the lowest possible level in Lake Hefner. We're getting some information prepared to go out to them to assuage those concerns. We think we'll be fine.
This is not all atypical. Last year was more atypical than this year because last year was so wet. You know, generally the rains come in September and in October, and then it's generally pretty dry until we get into the March, April, and sometimes the 1st of May. I mean, those are generally our filling periods at that point in time. So having lake levels down to where they're at right now, outside of Draper, obviously Draper, there's reasons for where we're at it there, but that's. The rest of it's not all that strange.
Well, one of the radio stations this morning had a reporter on it talking about this being one of the driest winters on record. And I'm just curious, is that, you know, obviously that impacted our water supplies, but if it's not, even though it was one of the driest winters on record, the results aren't abnormal to the extent of being, a matter of concern, well, that's fine.
Thank you, that's correct, and you may remember that late in the fall, after a dry fall, we did take a release from Lake Canton into Lake Hafner to help bolster us through the winter. We like getting, of course, a certain amount of storage in Lake Hafner, so we had the opportunity to catch very pure spring rainfalls when they happen. That's a good thing for us. Nonetheless, again, not outside the range of normal for this time of year at the lake, and we're watching it closely. And then finally, we have a report from the Oklahoma State Forester about the controlled burn, and we had planned a presentation for you. George Geisler is our state forester and the person who's been with us through the entire controlled burn process. We're glad to see him today.
Yes, thank you. Actually, I have been with this a long time. I planned the management plan for this when I was a service forester, and I first started with Oklahoma Forestry about 6 years ago. After that, I wrote the burn plan as the management chief 3 years ago, and I had to approve the ignition sequence as the state forester, and basically the feds told me, you know, that really doesn't happen all the time, so you might want to see. There's supposed to be 3 different people that signed those. But basically what I wanted to do was give you a quick overview of what happened out there at Lake Draper and kind of give you a plan for what we're doing and going forward. What you see up there right now is actually the action area. It's approximately 600 acres of cross timbers just to the south of 240 at the end of the runway of Tinker and at Douglas Boulevard, essentially. I'd like to say that the cooperation among the agencies, the police, the city police and fire departments did an absolutely excellent job of working with our crews that were out there. They did go ahead and keep the area clear of any hazards that were or potential hazards, I should say, for that area. And I did want to just tell them thanks. The other thing was that the city communications group did a great job of getting information out. We literally had no calls. It was amazing. We were anticipating a large amount of public reaction to this, and it was all positive. So there was no issues whatsoever with the communication. What happened out there is basically we began our ignition sequence around 11 o'clock. You'll see it over there on the southeast corner of that property, and began firing along the roads. Basically the type of technique that we use is called a wet line and a drip torch, going behind them and letting the fire creep in, and we worked towards the west there, finally finishing up somewhere in the neighborhood of 9 o'clock that evening. So it was about a 10-hour ignition sequence. It did run overnight. We allowed it to burn. The next morning our crews went out. There was a few spots that we reignited to make sure that we had the coverage, but overall the plan went better than we ever really expected. I mean, honestly, we worry now we set the bar a little bit too high. What you see is ignition from across the lake. You would see complete fuels consumption out there. We did manage to get through the ice damage. Literally, it crept through, like I said, right on schedule. That's another quick picture. We only had a couple of what we would call slopovers where we had spots that jumped outside the line. The biggest one was the size of 2 pickup trucks. What you see over there in the center to left side of the photo are our crews basically putting it out. They were right on site. That's what those dozers were there. It was within the property, the city property, but it was outside the burn unit. Those did, largest one, like I said, was about 2 pickup trucks worth. Whoops, wrong way. The effects that we saw out there, we did have a significant reduction in the wildland fuels. We've had foresters go out there, take a look at the grasses, the ice storm damage that was in place, the eastern red cedar issue that was out there, and we have had very good consumption of the majority of that. Specifically with the result of eastern red cedar control, you'll see in that image that those trees are roughly 4 feet tall, the one that's there on the left, and the idea that they are not consumed. We've had a lot of questions, well, why did those not consume? And everything 3 feet and under is gone, but as they get larger, they do not ignite that easily. As with the one you see there on the left, they've essentially been limbed up. And so while you do have eastern red cedar out there for potential reseeding, the fire danger of those red cedar has been minimalized because they're not going to crown. The fire goes underneath them, and you will not have the crowning and spotting should a fire occur. And this is just kind of another view of that area. You'll see that, again, they were limbed up, is what it boils down to. This kind of goes against what a lot of folks say is that they just burst into flames. They don't all the time. And the other thing is if you do not completely consume an eastern red cedar, it will hang on forever. So it only needs to have a little piece up there at the top, and it'll stay there. Just to give you the preliminary results, as I was saying, the minimal public reaction to the entire action. No major issues other than a couple of slop over. The foresters that went out and took a look at it, we got about 95% of the expected fuels reduction, which on average we look for 85% being a successful burn. So this burn really did a good job as far as getting not just the small fuels but the larger ice damage out of there. And then most eastern red cedar less than 3 feet has been controlled. What our recommendations are going forward is to begin a 3-year controlled burn rotation on this site, and that is something it goes along with the type of ecosystem that's there, which is cross timbers. It would have had fire on a 3 to 5 year cycle naturally, and basically if we say 3 years, given the way our weather conditions go, it may be 5 years, but shooting for that 3-year cycle will keep it so that the fuels are down and we won't have the future eastern red cedar problem. The other thing that we would suggest is in that area, after the foresters go through and do their evaluation, we will do a species composition so that we will know the composition based upon female, male eastern red cedars. They're actually dioecious, so there's females and males. If there are a lot of females out there, we would probably suggest that the crew use its equipment and go in and we will mark those have them drop them on the ground prior to the next burn of that area, and that way we will further reduce the possibility of spread of eastern red cedar, but at the same time minimize the cost to the city. I mean, not removing every tree, it's not really necessary, getting the females, and then also because the fuels have been reduced, it should be easier for that equipment to move around in that area. As far as going forward with needs, again, this is the lake property as we were told. I know that there is a discussion as to whether or not we can burn other sections out there. And, I put up there as the needs. It's really a commitment process. I mean, as you realize, this is not a turnkey, let's get it done very quickly. So the estimate of my guys right now is that depending upon what areas the city do want to include, because I understand some of it's been leased and some of it may be too close to homes, we look at probably 2 more units. We would like to keep it in the 600 to 700 acre range because of the operating period that's required to do this. This is a slow process. We don't want something that's going to race through it. So we're looking at probably 2 more burns to cover the remainder of the property. What that would also require is some planning. That us working with the city to determine what areas it was and then determining if fire breaks and all of the other things that go along with that. And like I said, fire break construction is what we see is going to be the primary need in planning this. And the city did some fire break construction using their own crews and did a great job on that. We were really impressed with how well they did. And then the last need is basically the weather to cooperate. As we go to those other areas, the wind directions are not quite as critical because we don't have the flight path of Tinker to worry about. This was in the worst case scenario for us. So we will have to play that, but we do think we have a wider window. The other thing that occurred, I spoke to the folks at Tinker. Their aircraft were playing around looking at the smoke and flying patterns that were not typical for them, so they realized it's not as big of a deal. So even going into the future, we're being given a lot more weather possibilities. And so that's what we would suggest going forward. I didn't know if there were any other questions that the trust may have.
Oh, well, what do we need to do to get the next one?
The next burn?
Get it on the chart.
Basically, all we have to do is get us work with Monty and his groups over there, determine what areas the city actually wants to be included in burns, and then we can do that over the summer, get our foresters out there while they're doing their post-burn evaluations. We can plan it and go for the first burn in the fall if that's the case. We would have to go through, like we did before, doing a memorandum of understanding type of a process between forestry in the city, but it should be a summertime project that we could get done. Right now, we're pretty much out of the window for conducting the prescribed burn in that area, obviously because of the weather conditions, but then also we're about to get into our weather patterns where the winds become way too variable for us to do it, so it would have to be a fall burn.
Well, I'd like to just start planning for another burn myself. I mean, I drive through it twice a day, and I can tell you the difference already is something you can see.
Yeah.
You can see back into it. It's if we get a really good rain where we'll get rid of some of that ash that's on the surface, it'll start to be green just within a matter of days, I think.
Right. Well, and as you go, the progress of going through the preliminary burns like this one are the smokiest burns. They are the ones that you see this, like you say, a dramatic decrease in fuels. As we go forward, it's an easier burn to do. There's less smoke produced, and it's lower cost, actually. I mean, the cost involved per acre with this one was a little bit higher than what is typical. As they go through, the cost drops dramatically on that type of work also because you're able to use lighter equipment and fewer personnel.
From my viewpoint, from whatever we need to do to pick the second area and get started doing it, I will tell you that it's going to make a huge difference in the way the lake, and the safety aspect of it is just a bonus, really.
Yeah,
Because
I agree.
If I have any reservation about it, it didn't burn as much as I'd like for it to. I know you're saying you were shooting for 85 and you got 95, and I'm wondering. I mean, I would have liked to have seen more of that debris-type tree and brush burned out of there. But,
Right. Well, you see, what you're going to get, sir, is now that it's basically consumed the actual, all the burnable material, over the course of this summer, you're going to see that start falling. And at that point, it's basically a consumed item now. So it's going to open up even further over the spring for you.
Is it possible that if when we select another area that's not directly under the flight pattern, that the next fire would be hotter than this one? I mean, in terms of, or is this what I should expect?
It would depend a lot on the species composition of it.
It's pretty much the same everywhere out there.
Well, my concern is as we go further to the east and southeast, you get into a little bit heavier red cedar concentration.
Right.
And also, if I'm remembering correctly, the fuels are such that what we call ladder fuels, the real small eastern red cedars leading to the bigger ones. This area did not have the ladder fuels in the cedar component as much. As we go to the other ones, I would think that it would get hotter. We would also have more crowning, which we would take into account while we're doing it. So you would see a little bit more significant impact, but this is kind of the type of burn that we really try for with this, with the understanding that the first one gets that big chunk done, and then as you go progressively, it gets better and better.
Well, I used to tell my kids if they just change their expectations a little bit, they'd be happier with what they got. So I need to do that.
I'm doing my best to lower your expectations so we can succeed.
I want to tell you, I appreciate the job. It's great. It is great. I just had hoped it'd all be gone.
I understand.
But it's great. It's great. I was out there the day it burned and got a really nice tour by somebody. I can't remember her name that took us on the tour, but it was. I think it's well worthwhile. Obviously, costs are some consideration in doing this, and we need to have some evaluation of what those costs are. But
I can tell you, the cost associated with it was about 600 acres, and it cost around $14,500 to do it, $14,500. And so you can plan on about that, for 2 other units. The cost per acre then drops based upon the fuels component to depending upon how we're doing. Like with this one, we see the cost dropping to almost half of what it was right that first time.
If we did a 3-year cycle.
I'm sorry?
If we did a 3-year cycle.
If you did a 3-year cycle, yes.
The next cost would be roughly half of what we spent.
Yeah, roughly half. Yeah, this one we had to bring extra equipment. We were concerned about those slop overs where it jumped outside the line, and we had 2 bulldozers sitting out there in case something happened. So we wanted to make absolutely certain nothing got out.
Well, it certainly didn't get much public response. Newspapers, TV stations, it was just non-event, essentially.
Understood.
It was a strange non-event. We expected so much worse.
Well, I asked Owen Mills about it after about some of my concerns, and the reason, because he had taken me down southeastern Oklahoma and shown me what happened there, but what I didn't take into consideration is those areas that I saw in southeastern Oklahoma had burned on a 3-year cycle or a 5-year cycle for the last 15 or 20 years. So a lot of that undergrowth that would eventually go if you did it every 3 years, it just takes a couple of cycles to get rid of it. So I'd already lowered my expectations a little bit.
Good for you. There we go.
I appreciate it. I appreciate
problem.
I appreciate
very
the
much.
help of the state, too, to make it work.
It's no problem, and if there are any further questions, just feel free to give me a holler. All right.
Did we vote on the reports?
We have a motion on A, B, and C.
Okay. Have a second? Have a motion and a second to receive reports A, B, and C. If there are any further questions? Hearing none, voting, please. Reports are received. Next item on the agenda is items that require individual consideration. The first one is item 7A, membership agreement with the National Credit Reporting.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve item 7A. Are there comments?
Just a question, Mr. Chairman. Do we periodically review the cost effectiveness of this lease program? There are certain administrative costs associated with doing this sort of thing, and we get some rental income out of, obviously, from the leases. Do we ever look at the two together and see, if this is a good program to continue, or?
It's a very good question. We have not in my tenure here, so obviously it's time. As I understand the history, we've owned some of this property for a very long time, and originally our thought was having the property occupied was a good thing. It required less investment on our part. We've been going through a process of improving the quality of what we provide lessees and what the lessees provide us. That has exceeded the cost, certainly, of the leases. We'll take a look at it.
Okay, thank you.
We have a motion on the resolution? Have a motion and a second on the resolution. Voting, please. Resolution is approved. Next item is now, these resolutions aren't binding, are they? Oh, I guess, okay. Well, we'll go ahead and do it anyway. We'll go ahead and do it anyway, I guess. Okay, the next resolution is a sole source purchase from InfoWorks software package.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve item 7B. Voting, please. 7B is approved. Item 7C is the acceptance of a quick claim deed for a sanitary relief line in the vicinity of 149th and Pennsylvania to 125th and Western.
Move approval. Second.
Motion and a second to approve. Voting. Quick claim deeds accepted. Next is the receipt of a DEQ approval of an engineering report for the Witcher lift station.
Move approval. Second.
Motion and a second to approve item 7E. Voting. Last item on the regular part of the agenda is to enter into executive session. I lost my head there. Yeah, I misskipped E, which is receipt from the Oklahoma Department of Transportation utility permits for 48-inch water main improvements.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve item 7E. Voting, please. Now, the last item on the regular agenda is to enter into an executive session concerning the potential litigation with regard to the purchase of the storage rights at Sardis. We do need executive session, I understand. Yeah. We'll hold it to the end then.
Move we enter into executive session.
Motion and a second to enter into executive session. Next, the next item, voting, please. Oh, you have to do it. Okay, all right, okay, all right. This is my first day. The next item is new business. Is there any new business? Hearing none, or comments from trustees? Staff?
Don't mean to keep you, but we are actually pumping water 24 hours a day from Lake Atoka as of last Friday.
Good.
We're very excited, very excited.
Should we expect the water levels to then begin to rise?
Very slowly, but yes. We're pumping at 58 million gallons a day today. We'll be ramping up to about 70, and that's when you'll begin to notice a good change in Lake Draper. Take a long time, but we're glad to be back.
Before it gets too full, any of you that haven't seen it in a long time ought to go look, because it's hard to imagine it could get as low as it is. I mean, it is really, really low.
Have we completed all the construction, recreational amenities?
No, sir. We're still working on it, and they're hot on creating the breakwater for the boats. Then we'll begin the construction process for our new boat stalls and other things as the lake level comes up, so that we use the water level to our best advantage in the construction.
Are there comments from citizens? Hearing none, we will go into executive session and return.